This happened about 2.5 years ago, in the winter of 2017 and early 2018. My partner and I, both female, 21 and 25, were living in the center of a popular and busy city in England at the time, in a ground floor flat. The street we lived on was just off a very busy road that had about 1,000 pubs on it, so it was normally quite populated at all hours, most days. The flat we lived in was one of about 7 in an old converted bakery. There was a very large, locked wooden gate with a buzzer, and the flats were all in the courtyard behind the gate. We shared the flat with my mom. Our bedroom windows both faced directly onto the street, where people would walk past on the pavement. On this given night, it must have been around 2 a.m., my girlfriend and I were laying in my bed watching films on my laptop. My bedroom was a tiny shoebox-sized room with a bed and a wardrobe, and about 5 square feet of extra floor space. Tiny. My window was right next to my bed and faced out onto the street. As we were laying on my bed, someone knocked on my window. That wasn't unusual, as I had quite a few friends that lived and worked near my flat, so we didn't think much of it. We continued watching our film and settled down. About half an hour to 45 minutes later, there is a massive bang on my window that sounded like someone slammed their fist against it and ran off. We were a bit startled and decided to go take a look outside, as it was evidently not one of my friends at this point. We went into the courtyard and opened the main gate, and couldn't see anyone on the street at all. It was freezing and snowing, but still unusually quiet. We stood there for about 5 minutes, just looking around. I noticed a man on the other side of the street wearing a mid-length trench coat and heavy boots. Just as my eyesight is awful and I never wear my glasses, I didn't see any discerning features. He was on the opposite side of the street and was walking along the street from the main road, from left to right, up towards our flat. I got a bit of a strange vibe from him and pointed him out to my girlfriend. We both just stood and watched for a few minutes, and as he passed, he didn't turn to look at us or anything. After less than a minute, I looked to my right and saw that the same guy had now crossed over to our side of the street, and he was walking towards us. My girlfriend and I watched him for a minute, and then proceeded to panic and shut ourselves behind the gate. Instead of going back into our flat, we crouched down out of sight so we could watch through the gap under the gate to see if he passed by. The thing I remember the most vividly is the sound of his boots creaking on the snow, and watching him come to a dead stop directly outside the gate. My girlfriend and I were both now suitably shitting ourselves, and we quietly hurried back inside. Our flat had an open-plan kitchen and living room, with a door that led into the straight hallway. My bedroom was right at the end of the hallway, and my mom's was off to the right. All of the lights were off, and I poked my head into the hall, as I had a clear line of sight into my bedroom from there. When I looked, I could see the silhouette of this man pacing up and down, slowly outside my bedroom window. My mom had slept soundly through all of this, but I decided to go in and wake her up to let her know what was going on. She brushed it off until I told her to look outside, and she saw this man now pacing back and forth outside her window and mine. Knowing that at the right angle, you could see through my blinds from outside, I pressed myself up against the wall and scooted my way down the hallway back to the living room, and I rang the police. My girlfriend and I weren't really sure what to make of the situation, but it felt pretty ominous. The police arrived about 10 minutes later, and they met me outside. They said they found him and he claimed to be homeless, looking for a place to stay, but that he was very well dressed and clean-shaven, and had no other possessions with him. The police officer offered forth the fact that it's more likely he was intrigued by the fact that we were 2 young females in bed together, and he was having a little snoop. The next day, I was outside having a cigarette with my girlfriend, and I noticed a very prominent, sticky handprint on my window, as if someone had their hand pressed up against it, looking in. No thank you. My girlfriend swears that she saw him at the train station just a few months later. When I was a teenager, my older brother moved out and my parents both worked late. So occasionally, I would spend evenings by myself after school. We lived in the countryside a few miles outside of town and had a good collection of neighbors. The day went as normally as ever. I went to school, got home, turned on the TV. I had a snack and texted one of my friends who I had a crush on. It wasn't long afterward that I noticed a man outside my house. He walked past a few times. He wasn't an ordinary person walking around the block. He looked scraggly and unkempt. I ducked as far as I could behind the chair, still trying to see him out the living room windows, hoping that he didn't see me. But soon he came to the front door and he knocked. I was texting my friend the entire time, increasingly getting freaked out. As he knocked on the door, I stupidly went to answer. I had my phone on me with 911 at the ready. I tried to silently unlock the door to not alert the man. I opened the door a crack. There was a screen door separating myself from the man. I was ready to slam the door and lock it if anything happened. The man looked at me with crazed, paranoid eyes. He had a large dark beard and looked to be in his late 50s or early 60s. He seemed out of breath and his face drenched with sweat. He was larger too, more the reason to keep my guard. I sheepishly said, "Hello?" "Please, call the police, they're after me," he said in an exhausted smoker voice. He kept looking at the road and tensed whenever a car would occasionally pass. "Who's after you?" I asked, getting ready to slam the door. "I barely escaped, they were right behind me, please. Can I come inside?" At this, I knew to call the police. "Just wait here, I'll get someone to help." My heart was in my throat at this time. I didn't know if this guy was then going to try to force open the door, so I quickly shut it and locked it. I ran to the back door and locked that as well as I called 911. My heart was racing and I could barely tell the operator my information, but they said that they would send somebody out. It wasn't long until a patrol car arrived, but it felt like forever. The entire time I kept watching the man who then walked into my driveway, pacing nervously. The officer got out and proceeded to talk with the man and then got in the car and left. I had no idea what happened to him, nor if he was telling the truth. He could have been drunk or crazy, but it was a genuine fear in his eyes when I looked at him. Something truly scared him, and it scared me to think that there could be someone out there that wanted people for whatever reason. So, for the crazed scared man and whoever he was running from, let's not meet. Hey, for the record, I'm a female. I'm turning 19 this year and the story happened when I was 15. Oh, and also I'm from France, which can explain my English mistakes if there are any. When I was 15 years old, I just got into junior year. I created my first Twitter account that I deleted because of this story. Some information. I didn't tell anyone my username, neither my family nor my friends, because I didn't have any. My profile picture was an avatar, so no pictures of me on the account. And as a location, I said Paris because I lived in the suburbs. I didn't have many followers, 20 or maybe 30, and I didn't follow that many people either, so my timeline wasn't really interesting. One evening in October, someone sent me quite a strange direct message. It was a 200 followers account, and the message was, "Hi, my name is Rob and I just turned 17, and wanted to know if you lived in Redacted, because I will soon move in and go to the town high school, and I'm looking for more friends." Redacted was obviously the town that I lived in. I immediately thought something was wrong because there was nowhere on my profile that I said where I actually lived. But after some time thinking, I remembered of a tweet I made weeks ago about buses, and I mentioned the city. So I told myself he just looked up for Redacted and found my tweet. His age wasn't shocking because I'm 2 years ahead of my classmates. I was bored and he was polite and I answered him. I told him I indeed lived in Redacted and go to high school there. The discussion was natural, and we talked a lot that night, mainly about high school, about the food at the cafeteria, about the teachers, that kind of thing. But as it was getting very late, he tried to interpose some personal questions, like, do you live far away from the school? In a house or in an apartment? Do you live with both of your parents? Is there 5 of you? You're not often home alone, right? I never answered because it was way too shady for me, and unfortunately, he didn't insist. Unfortunately, because if he did, I would have probably blocked him. The next day, the same thing. We talked a lot and he was still asking personal questions, just to get to know me better, and so I asked him too. He always answered with what seemed like honesty. I still didn't answer the questions about my house though, because he didn't need to know anything. It lasted 2 or 3 weeks, but it was enough for me to develop feelings for him. He was handsome, super kind, and it was everything that I needed. Because I had been bullied for years and even today, I still develop strong feelings, but most importantly, blind trust in people who are friendly to me. In France in October, we have a 2-week-long vacation, and the day before back to school day, he finally told me that he was coming to my high school because he finally moved in with his mom, and he asked me a place to meet during the morning break. I was so happy and relieved to be able to finally meet him, and I told him to just join me in the hall. But when he understood that there would be people around, he said he would prefer an isolated place because he was afraid he would not recognize me, and he didn't want to spend the break looking for me. It was a good excuse for me, so I told him to meet me in the 3rd floor bathroom because we weren't allowed to stay there during the breaks, and no one would disturb us. In my head, even though it was a little bit creepy, I was still in school, so nothing could happen to me. Next day, back to school day, I made myself pretty. I wore my best clothes, I counted down the minutes, and finally, when break time arrived, I ran to the bathroom and waited. And when he arrived, it was him. He was not a catfish. He looked quite like his profile picture, but I still noticed that he seemed a little bit older than he had told me. I thought 20 years old instead of 17. We talked a lot, we got along well. I was so pleased, and at the end of the break, he asked me to go to the fast food with him for lunch. I said no because I didn't have any money, and I always refuse for people to pay for me. It's a principle. He seemed disappointed, but offered to walk me home after classes. I explained that I had to take the bus, but that he could walk me to the bus stop. He looked disappointed again, but he finally accepted. And that's exactly what happened. It was so great that it quickly became some kind of routine. We met in the 3rd floor bathroom during the morning break, and he walked me to the bus stop after classes. Surprising fact, I never saw him in the hallways nor at the cafeteria, but I thought that at the time that the building was huge and that there were over 1,500 students in there, so if our schedules didn't coincide, there was no way that we could meet each other. This little game lasted until December, so almost a month and a half. The 14th of December, a Thursday, I complained about how lonely I was going to be that evening, because my dad was abroad for work, and my brother was always at his friend's house. My little sis was on a school trip, and my mom had to work late that very night. It was very reckless of me, but after weeks, I thought I could trust him. That evening, he walked me to the bus stop. We both waited. I got on the bus, waved at him, and put on my earphones. I had 2 stops before my house, and it was about 5:45 in December, so it was already really dark outside. And as I got out of the bus, I had a really bad feeling. There was that very uncomfortable sensation on my stomach, and I felt like I was being observed. I pressed pause on my music, but I kept my earphones on, so that people thought I couldn't hear anything. And that's probably what saved my life. I lived in a suburban neighborhood, very silent, especially at night. with no visibility on the big road the buses passed in. When I heard footsteps behind me, I understood that I was right. There was someone following me, and he was not well-intentioned. At least, I could tell that he wasn't accelerating, so he wasn't trying to catch up to me, but I couldn't guess how long that it would last. As quietly as possible, I tried to reach for my keys in my pocket, and when I finally pulled them out, I ran. As fast as I could, the best sprint of my life. I don't know how it worked, but I managed to open and to close the door before he could reach me. I then deactivated my alarm, which, by the way, confirmed that I was home alone, and took a look through the glass panel on the door. It is not a peephole, it's a whole window, so if somebody wanted to see what's happening inside, they can. It was Rob, a few meters away, looking at me with a really creepy face. He followed me to my home, probably with a car, and he was clearly not here for chit-chat. I still don't know why I didn't call the police. I was totally paralyzed. We both stared at each other for a minute, and when I took back control of my body, I ran into the kitchen to get a knife, and I got back to the door. He was there too, banging against the door. I feared for a second that the glass would break, but it didn't happen. That moment, when I was pushing against the door, praying for it not to break while he was kicking harder and harder, was the longest I've ever experienced. After maybe 5 minutes, he stopped and got around the house, knocking against every shutter, and got back to the door. He looked very angry, but then my neighbor's car reached my house and Rob ran away, probably thinking that it was my mom coming home. On Twitter, Rob sent me 1,000 messages before I could block him. He then deleted his account, and I thought that I was done with this story. But quickly after, some accounts which had just been created followed me. Their @names were all a series of numbers and the first letter of his name. And as soon as I blocked one, another one would follow me. I chose to delete my account because I couldn't make it stop, and it was too hard to endure because they were sending me dozens of insulting direct messages. Later, I talked to the people who were supposed to be Rob's classmates, because I haven't met him again in days, but not a single one ever heard about Rob. This guy was never a student in my high school, and this is why I never met him apart from our daily meetings. That's probably why he seemed so old. I never heard about him anymore, and I'm still asking myself, what did he want, and what could have happened that night? So Rob, let's never meet again. For background information, I'm female and on a volunteer fire department, and this happened a few years ago when I was 20. During our drills at my former department, our bay doors are open so people have been known to walk by and talk to us, ask us questions, or just look at the trucks. One evening, this dude, a 23-year-old male, strolls by. A fellow firefighter from another town, which isn't uncommon. Firemen stop by other departments all the time when in town. He made his rounds and was talking to my chief, my captain, the young guys, and he made his way over to me and started chatting me up. He was a nice guy and good looking enough, and we exchanged Snapchats. And it didn't take long to figure out what a psycho he was. After a week of talking, he messaged me saying, "So, how come you didn't swipe right?" Confused, I asked him what he meant, and then this unfolded. He told me that all of this was an attempt to impress me with how devoted he was. He had found me on a dating app, used my picture from the dating app to find my Facebook, since in one photo I'm wearing a uniform that had my last name. He then used my profile picture to find what fire department I was on by looking closely at the fire truck in the background. He told me that he walked by my department almost every day to see when we drilled and to spot me. As he's telling me this, I'm confused as heck, and he goes, "I'm having a pretty rough day. Is it okay if I can come over?" Cue to him telling me he's on his way. He used my Snapchat location to find my work and house. My location on everything is now off. When he came to my house, he brought a love letter and gifts. He said that he was sorry and confused and he just really wanted things to work out. I told him that he needed to leave and never speak to me again, to which he obliged by leaving, saying if it would make me happy. He made maybe 3 or 4 new Snapchats and Facebook profiles in an attempt to add me back. At one point he got clever and made his Snapchat name Chris Smith 1990, which made me go, hey, it's my friend Chris Smith. And lo and behold, it wasn't Chris Smith. Once I realized it wasn't my friend, but instead the psycho, he asked what I could do to make it up. I texted, get lost and go set yourself on fire. I then got a video of him walking in the woods and then he set himself on fire. He flickered a light over his hand and thought, yeah, okay. And then his entire hand and arm lit up, followed by screaming, and it cut out. I started to freak out thinking, oh crap, and immediately got a photo of the hairs on his knuckles burnt off and his burnt shirt. He was okay and he had coated his arm in something flammable, but something that wouldn't actually damage him. So I blocked him again. He messed off after coming to my house again, and I had a gun in my hand and told him to stop or the cops would be involved. But to be fair, it wasn't loaded. I didn't know how to use it and was planning on swinging the thing if it got really bad. So, crazy stalker who set himself ablaze. Let's not meet. When I was 5, my grandfather died. I watched him die. I held his hand as he died. His battle with cancer was a hard one for me to cope with, and the nightmares afterwards were suitably intense. However, none would surpass the dreams that I've started to have a week after his passing. A week later, I had my first of what seems like hundreds of dreams of the character I dubbed the Green Man. In the dream, a man on a yellow hood with green warty skin told me that my house wasn't safe and that I needed to follow him. He emerged from my clothing rack in my closet, and he didn't seem to walk with his legs. Rather, he floated across the ground at a walking pace. In fact, I'm not sure this green man even had legs. His cloak drooped so low where legs would exist on a normal human, so who knows. In this dream, I got out of bed and followed the green man to the side yard of my grandma's house, where he told me that I needed to cross if I wanted to be safe. He gestured at the road in front of me, but instead of a road, it was a purple, flowing river filled with large fish. The water rushed very powerfully and the fish seemed malicious. I was so scared that I wanted to cry. I couldn't cross. Ultimately, the green man left me as he crossed the purple water. I woke up as soon as he disappeared. I was standing on the edge of the road, ready to step off the curb. Every time after this first dream, he would lead me to a different place so I could escape my house, and every time, I was blocked by a barrier and woke up in the real world analog of that place. I've woken up in my grandma's shed, in her bathroom, in my neighbor's yard, etc. And every time, there was some sort of physical barrier stopping me. One time, it was skeletons hanging from trees. Another, it was flaming grass and so on. Every time, there was a dire reason for me to escape, but I never could. I stopped having these dreams when I turned 11. I'm now 24 and I haven't thought about the Green Man since. The memory of this guy was buried so deep that I literally forgot the hundreds of times that I sleptwalked into random places and almost got myself hurt. However, my grandmother called me and asked me if I had remembered my sleepwalking as a kid. Evidently, my brother is also sleepwalking and doing really weird stuff in his sleep. No mention of the Green Man, however. Last night, I had a dream where the Green Man crawled up from under my bed and told me that my grandmother was going to die if I didn't go help her. He led me down my stairs and out to my front door, where again the road was a purple stream and I immediately knew I was dreaming. In my dream, I had stepped out of my front door and onto my porch. I had my keys in my hand and a cigarette in my mouth. I woke up on my front porch, ready to light a cigarette. I'm scared that I'll see him again. What causes this? My therapist said that he is the manifestation of my grief and abuse as a kid, but that doesn't explain why I sleepwalk, or why he tells me chaotic things. I'm getting really freaked out and I'm scared one time I won't wake up and I will end up getting hurt. More importantly, I'm worried for my brother and his safety. What if his dream world doesn't have barriers like mine did? He's 16 and he has access to a car. I'm super concerned that he was going to get seriously hurt or worse, and I'm not entirely sure how to stop it. I'm even scared to mention the Green Man to him, because if he also says he has dreams of a Green Man, then I'm not sure my psyche can handle it. It would confirm some sort of supernatural reality that I really want to deny. If he doesn't have the Green Man dream, then I can continue to believe this is some weird, psychological damage caused by witnessing death at such a young age. Since people are going to ask, I'm going to go ahead and describe this figure to the best of my ability. He stands about 6 feet tall, wears a bright yellow cloak with a hood that covers the top of his head right down to his eyes. His eyebrows seem to be made of some sort of algae or moss, and his skin is covered in warts. He is a deep forest green with coal black eyes and a scar on his left cheek that is bright red and seems to leak a purplish fluid that he often wipes away as he speaks. His voice is like a combination of Darth Vader and Orlando Bloom as Legolas, in that it is deep and grating but also sing-songy and welcoming. He doesn't seem to walk but rather float about 6 inches off the ground, artificially increasing his height. He doesn't have any symbols on him that I can discern, just that mustard yellow cloak and his oozing scar. I can't tell if he is malicious, but he has full control over me in my dream state, as if I'm under a spell, until I encounter an obstacle in the dream world. I wish I knew what this was. I'll reply if he returns tonight. I recently made a post about reoccurring nightmares I had about a Green Man that I've had since I was about 8. To summarize, the Green Man would always tell me in dreams to go into the road or into my neighbor's shed, and I would sleepwalk towards those areas only to wake up. I also mentioned my brother has been sleepwalking lately, but found out that it wasn't related to the Green Man, and I've kinda let my guard down on that. This brings us up to 3 days ago when I first saw her. I was lying in bed with my partner, and from the upper corner of the bedroom, I could see movement. I sat up and a whole person was in the corner of the room looking into my eyes. I immediately thought I knew I was asleep, because during my Green Man dreams I had the same experience of a person materializing in my room and looking at me. Also in line with the Green Man, I couldn't scream or make any other noises, let alone move. I was frozen in a trance-like state, which is something I've grown used to over the last 16 years of my life. The woman remained silent the whole time and walked from the far corner of my bedroom to next to the door and gestured for me to follow. And so I did, very much against my will. I got up and I walked down the stairs into my living room, where she proceeded to step into the wall and disappear. After she disappeared into the wall, I must have fallen asleep because I was having standard dreams about work and my family, until she appeared again and I was now in my kitchen, with her gesturing to my back door. As I went to open the back door, she vanished into the walls again, and I was back to a normal dream. I woke up an unknown amount of time later, sitting in my living room thinking to myself, what a creepy nightmare. I need to take my sleep meds so I don't keep sleepwalking. And I lit a cigarette with my Zippo lighter. As I was going to close my lighter, she flew out from the wall at me and blew out the flame, and then flew through me and disappeared. I was 100% conscious at that time. I roll my own cigarettes, and if I had been sleepwalking, I would have not been able to get into the correct amount of tobacco and fill the paper to then roll and lick. Also, my Zippo was open with the flame freshly out, and the wick was still smoldering. Every night since, she has appeared in my dreams but not spoken. I've been taking heavy sedatives so I don't sleepwalk, and as an extra precaution, my partner and I switched the sides of the bed that we were on, so that she would wake up if I ever got out of bed. I'm scared now that I managed to get possessed or that I'm haunted. How can I be sure? So, for the past 6 months or so, I've been feeling a certain presence around me. It's nothing scary and I haven't actually seen them. Basically what happens is that I'll see something or someone in my peripheral vision, then nothing is there when I turn to look. Sometimes I see it when I'm walking down the street. Sometimes I see it in my rearview mirror when I'm driving in my car. But I can never look dead at it. Back in November 2019, I was almost in a really bad car wreck. Someone traveling in the opposite direction of my car had fallen asleep at the wheel, and they had swerved into my lane. They almost hit me head on while I was going around 65 miles an hour. At the last minute, I jerked the wheel and I ended up on the side of the road, with no scratches at all in my person or vehicle. After it had happened, I had a panic attack and realized just how crazy that was. I know I should have been hit. I know that something should have happened. This car got so close to mine and we both somehow just missed one another. When I was having my little panic attack, I could feel someone with me in the car. I could just feel deep down that someone or something intervened and basically had saved my life. Last week, I read a post about someone who asked their ghost to give them a sign, a blue car, and so I did the same thing. I spoke out loud and said, "Hey, I don't know if I'm being paranoid or if someone is actually here with me right now, but please give me a sign so that I know that someone is here." The sign was for me to see an orange Corvette, a favorite color and car, within the next 24 hours. And what do you know? I saw two before the 24 hours was up. Those cars are not very popular where I live, so it was really strange to see two in one day, let alone both of them being orange. I guess my advice that I'm seeking would be, what's next? I have no idea who this person could be. Why are they following me around? Why are they protecting me from crazy accidents in everyday life? Ever since I saw the Corvettes, I've been feeling the presence grow stronger, like it's there more often now or something. I'm new to this whole thing, so has anybody else experienced anything like this? What did you do? What do you think? Let me know. So I don't really know how to explain this, or if it even fits on this sub, or even what actually happened if I'm being honest. But regardless, I'll try to relay this story. I was driving to work yesterday morning and I'm coming up a side street that connects to a very busy road in my area. It's the main road that stretches through like 20 towns. I get to the red light at this main road and sit there for about 15 seconds before seeing a car pull up behind me. As the car comes to a complete stop behind me, my eyes drift from the rearview mirror to the stoplight in front of me. It was red still. I then look down at my radio clock and it says 7:36. And this is going to sound strange, but for a period of time, that seemed to stretch on until infinity. I kind of felt like this intense pressure was all around me, like I was zoned out and I couldn't clear my head, or move my body because I was obsessed with the numbers that I was seeing. Like I was in a trance or something and it wasn't silent around me, but it was at the same time, like very, very loud, pressing silence. I couldn't move, but I also wasn't trying to move. Almost like I was paralyzed with fear and I knew I was frozen but couldn't really process it or try to move. I don't know. I really can't explain it. Even now, it's so confusing to me. After who knows how long of being stuck in this trance, suddenly everything snaps back to normal, instantly. The very first thing I register is that the person behind me is laying on their horn. I look up and I see the light is green. I begin to drive forward, feeling completely 100% normal again. and once I get into the middle of the intersection, I sense this large presence to the left of me. I turn my head to look out my driver's side window just in time to see a huge truck coming right at me. It hits me, and I could feel my body break. I felt and heard so many of my bones get absolutely crushed. Suddenly, I'm upside down in my car, in so much pain that I can hardly breathe, covered in glass, and I can hear someone screaming. The last thing I remember before I passed out about 10 seconds later was seeing cop lights and distinctly thinking to myself, wow, how did they get here so fast? This is important. The next thing I remember, I open my eyes and I'm sitting in my car at the red light. The intense pain that I felt a moment ago is fading fast, but it's still there. Almost like a ghost version of itself, if that makes sense. I'm intensely confused at this point, and I start looking around in a panicky way, and my eyes trail across the clock again. It says 7:36, and I'm just beyond confused. I know it wasn't a daydream. It was so real. I'm frozen in place staring at the clock trying to figure out what the heck just happened. After about 5 or 10 seconds, I hear the person behind me start to beep at me, but I'm shaking and I'm about to cry, and so overwhelmed with leftover fear that I can't even react to it. They start to lay on their horn and I still can't move because I'm just so confused and frightened. Now at this point, I was starting to calm myself down and try to rationalize what happened. I was beginning to convince myself that it had to have just been a daydream. It was early enough and I was tired enough that I even started to think I just nodded off at the red light and I had dreamed the crash. What the hell else could have happened, right? If it weren't for what happened next, I probably would have been able to go the rest of my life believing that I had fallen asleep and dreamed it. The moment the clock turned 7:37, like the very second the numbers changed, a huge truck comes barreling through the light, definitely speeding. They ran their red light and crossed right in front of my car. A few seconds later, a cop, who must have just been driving behind the truck in the first place, runs the red light as well, turning on his lights in the process and beginning to pursue the speeding truck. They both drove out of my view within a few seconds. I was so shaken I just pulled my car to the side of the road, right where I was, and sat there in silence, for I don't even know how long. Like, what normal explanation could I possibly come up with for this? There isn't one. I hadn't seen the truck or the cop car before they ran the lights in front of me. So how did the dream crash that I had include those very specific and very real details? The entire area that I live in is covered in trees, so it's not like I can see very far down the road in either direction. I know for a fact I did not see the truck or the cop car before I experienced the crash. I'm still so shaken. How do I rationalize this experience to myself? I feel disillusioned by something, but I don't even know what. I feel like I'm going crazy. I needed to share this with people who won't automatically dismiss this as a hallucination or a dream. Hi everyone, this is my first time posting and I want to give a brief description of my background and then delve into what happened. I consider myself to be a Christian. However, I'm not Christian in the sense of I don't go to church every Sunday, and I don't believe the Bible is 100% true. I know it was a written book by man and edited by man. I do believe the Bible has a place in my belief. I believe it holds wisdom and knowledge important to my faith. I believe in Jesus and God. I also believe there is more out there. I believe there is good and I believe there is evil. And I think I am empathetic to a degree. I'm learning that how I feel and how I react to the world around me is different than some people, and that there are ways to help with this. I know I could go on for a long time, but that's a brief history. Anyway, so my anxiety has been through the roof. I can't sleep well, and when I do, my dreams are so vivid. And I've had a couple of dreams that directly relate to something going on in someone else's lives that I have no clue of until I dreamt it, and reached out to them. It's starting to scare me. And so I decided to try something to cleanse myself. I'm new to this, so please, don't judge or bash me. So here's my experience. I went outside. There's a storm moving in. The wind is blowing and there's lightning to my north, with the occasional rumble of thunder. I feel silly, but I light my white candle, which I would like to note did not stay lit for more than a minute because of the wind, but I figure it's the idea of it, right? So I lit my candle and I made my salt circle. When I closed the circle, I could feel a snap. It felt like the world was lifted off my shoulders and I could breathe. I could think. I closed my eyes and I began to pray. I prayed for strength and healing. I prayed for the cleansing of my soul and my energy. I prayed for protection on my family and myself. I prayed for wisdom. I prayed for strength and wisdom to cleanse my home, to protect it, to help me be a beacon of light to my family, to fill our home with love and laughter, to feel the presence of the Lord when someone walks in. I prayed for God to give me energy from the earth to cleanse my home and my spirit and my family. At this point, I hear something moving on the ground. I looked down and I thought it was one of our cats for a moment, and I couldn't get my brain to work because it was too big to be our cats and none of our cats are allowed outside. I then realized it was a possum. It turned and looked at me, came to the circle, stayed there for a moment, and then walked away. I thought it was odd, but I continued my prayer. It wasn't until I came in the house and relayed my experience to my husband that he pointed out that he thinks the opossum was a manifestation of my prayers, my spirit animal. But this is all brand new to me. Was it just a fluke or could it have been something more?